Hi guys, welcome back for your final video here in cognitive behavioral therapy. This is just going to be putting it together. So all the pieces that you've learned so far, again, as simple as we possibly can, we're going to kind of put together the entire triangle. So thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And we're going to essentially use the skill set with it just to kind of give you an overview of how this all comes together. I have only provided 2 examples here for you. Again, one of my biggest values within teaching people therapy is that self-accountability piece. So I don't provide a ton of examples for people. I really like people to go home and be able to come back with examples so I can kind of help them break that down. So I have only provided 2 examples here for you today. I'm hoping that's enough. If it's not, again, feel free to email me at utlcsw@gmail.com. I will be happy to provide you with more resources, more examples, things like that to kind of help you put the pieces together. So the first example that we have with the triangle and kind of putting it all together with the skills is situation. I had a fight with my spouse. That's it. Very simple. Situation. My thoughts. I don't feel supported. It feels like I can never show emotions. This always happens, etc., etc. Okay. So we've identified the situation. We identified some of the thoughts. Now we're going to go through, and if you remember, the skill set for the thoughts part of the triangle was to identify those thinking errors. So in that first thought, I don't feel supported. The word don't becomes all or nothing. Okay. I don't want you to focus on reframing this right now, right? Because even a lot of times in individual therapy, people will ask me, well, that's great. I can identify the error all day long, but then what do I do? That will come later on when we do reframing. The whole goal of kind of the videos that I post is for a couple of reasons. One reason I'm not going to get into yet, but one of the biggest reasons why I put this in the order that I do is to get you to a place where you can reframe it in a very cognitively, I don't even know how to say it, emotionally sound way, I guess. I want you to really, really make it make sense in the brain. So there's a reason why I go in the order that I do. So don't feel bad if you're like, okay, I can take the don't out, but what do I do with it? We will get to that later. Right now, I just want you to focus on identifying that there are errors in the thought that are possibly causing negative emotions and or behaviors. Okay, so that second thought. It feels like I can never show emotions. That word never is also all or nothing. This always happens. Always is also all or nothing. So don't, never, and always are all or nothing thinking errors. So right off the bat, if you remember, if you have an error at the top of the triangle, the other 2 pieces are going to have a negative consequence and not make much sense. So I'm hoping you see that as we move on to the emotions. So there's the emotions that I have listed are sadness, frustration, annoyed, isolated, dismissive, critical, disappointed, withdrawn, judgmental, again, etc., etc. We could keep going and going on a feelings wheel and probably fill a whole slide up with emotions that would come from having a fight with your spouse. But those are just the ones that I've used. So you can see the skill set is use the feelings wheel to further identify. So all you want to do in this particular part is identify emotions that are appropriate per the situation. Okay. Behavior. I don't talk to my spouse for the rest of the day, or avoidance. Okay. That is the adaptive child ego. We're not in critical parent, right? Because we're not necessarily criticizing that person, at least not in this example. You absolutely could criticize your spouse, but in this example, we're not doing that. We're not in nurturing parent because we're not nurturing anybody. We're not in free child because, you're clearly not like, oh, nothing else matters. We're in that adaptive child. And again, remember, it's the, I don't like it. I don't want to. Okay. Again, people laugh at that, but I just like to give you a little depiction of kind of what the brain is doing when you're in adaptive child in particular. So in this particular incident, you're going to get to a spot where you're going to be able to reframe the thought process to cut down on the amount of emotions that you're feeling, to in turn get into an adult behavioral ego, which would be being able to come up with a script free from thinking errors to ultimately solve whatever problem it was that caused the fight. That's essentially where you will get to if you continue to watch these videos. You will be able to get to that spot. Okay, so that's our first example. Again, if this doesn't make sense or you're looking for other examples, feel free to email me. We will try and get you through it as best as we can. But example number 2. So situation, I got written up at work. Again, we keep the situation as brief as we can. So thoughts, my boss probably thought I was so stupid. I am dumb for making that mistake. I should have known better, etc., etc. So remember, the skill set is to identify the thinking errors. So that first thought, my boss probably thought I was so stupid, is the mind reading thinking error. Remember, we might not have evidence to support that their boss thought that they were stupid or your boss thinks you're stupid. Okay, so that's kind of mind reading. I am dumb for making that mistake. I am dumb is the labeling thinking error. They labeled themselves dumb. Okay, and then the last thought, I should have known better, was the should statement, the shoulda, coulda, woulda. So again, all 3 of our thoughts are rooted in an error, which means somewhere along the way, emotions and or behavior is not going to make much sense and rooted in negativity. So let's take a look at the emotions. Again, I only listed a small amount: humiliated, awful, vulnerable, ashamed, inferior, insecure, weak, etc., etc. Again, if you remember, use the feelings wheel to further identify appropriate emotions. Let's try and get out of that core. Okay, behavior. I yelled at my kids when I got home from work, or projection. Okay, so because I'm feeling angry, I'm now going to project that onto somebody else. There's also a couple of other defense mechanisms that this could technically be. We're not going to get into that right now. I'm just going to use one that's pretty simple. Again, this is going into the behavioral ego, critical parent, and adaptive child. So this is an example of kind of both, because they're being very critical to themselves, calling themselves dumb and that they should have known better. So they're critical parent and they're adaptive child, because they're not focused on solving the problem, because now the problem becomes, I come home and yell at the kids, instead of using skills to kind of reframe their thoughts and gather themselves and try to solve the problem before they even got home. Again, that is one of the places you're going to get to. You're going to get to a spot where you don't necessarily have to use defense mechanisms. I mean, some defense mechanisms just kind of happen, but we want to kind of get you out of all of that. So those are the 2 examples that I have. They're very short and sweet, but this is essentially what I do with people in individual therapy, is go through these. We identify all parts of the triangle, and then we just kind of go through and start trying to break them down. I don't want you to focus on anything else necessarily, just getting used to what those pieces mean. And the only piece of advice I could give you is, when you realize that you're not an adapter or an adult ego, how could you get into adult ego, right? Because identifying the thinking errors is it gets pretty easy once you get an idea of how to identify them. That part gets pretty easy. Using the feelings wheel is pretty self-explanatory, and the behavior is one that you can really, really change. I haven't taught you how to reframe thinking errors yet, but I have essentially taught you, okay, adult ego means solve the problem. What is my problem at hand? How do I get into adult ego? What evidence do I have? So that's one of the most important pieces that you can take home with you. Using your evidence, identifying your errors. What was my feelings, appropriate feelings? What was my behavioral ego? If it wasn't adult, how could I get into adult? Okay, so those are the 2 examples that I have provided for you. So a quick little review. After you have finished all of the videos regarding cognitive behavioral therapy, you will have the identification of thinking errors, along with a skill set to help support or debunk the errors. Okay, so we identified Mr. Murderman was the skill set, the evidence. You will have the appropriate use of emotions, including the difference between the emotion anxiety and the disorder of anxiety. Okay, the skill set was your feelings wheel to help identify appropriate emotions and get out of the habit of telling yourself you're anxious. Okay, lastly, behavioral egos. You are going to have the PAC model to see what ego you are in: parent, adult, and or child. And if you're not an adult ego, how can you get into adult ego? So that is what you should have after all of the cognitive behavioral therapy videos. Again, if you're stuck on something, please email me, utlcsw@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. If you're looking for additional resources on thinking errors, emotions, feelings wheel, evidence, If you have examples that you've come up with and you're like, I'm not quite sure what fits with what, go ahead, email me. I will guide you as best I can per our guidelines within the state that I'm licensed in. If you need help connecting to a therapist in your state, again, I'm happy to assist. Psychology Today is a great place to kind of find people in your area. But like I said, I will help you as best I can with the kind of ethical boundaries that I'm held within per my state. So again, any questions, comments, concerns, email me. I hope you've enjoyed this. Next, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit and dive into dialectical behavioral therapy. So I hope you guys stay tuned. Dialectical behavioral therapy is a pretty known therapy modality, and it is a branch off of cognitive behavioral therapy. It was actually created from cognitive behavioral therapy. So that is coming up next. I hope you guys have enjoyed so far. We'll see you next time.